But next, I want to move us towards our Navigating the Unknown series, bringing two friends in here. We've got Alexis and Arshiya. Alexis is working with Global Entrepreneurship Network. She's got a wide background of experience too, working with all kinds of different entrepreneurship and social innovation organizations and networks around the world. So she'll be bringing a lot of that experience into our conversation today. And then we also have Arshiya, who runs an awesome social enterprise called Cocoon Active. She'll tell you a whole bunch more about that, but it's been kind of her baby that she's been getting off the ground these past couple years. Both Alexis and Arshiya have been involved in our past Ignite retreats, which unfortunately we had to cancel a couple of weeks ago, but this is hopefully a little bit of a supplemental piece. So that's what we got going on. Again, if you've got questions, feel free to add them down in the question box down below. But to kick things off, we're going to invite Alexis in here with us. So let me go and invite her to the channel. Hey, all
Look
right.
at that.
We did it, right? We are pivoting on the fly. This is our first time. So Alexis, congratulations being the very first Instagram Live interview we get to do. So
thank you. I appreciate it. Also, your background is so rad compared to mine. Mine is very beige.
Well, insider tip, you can get this on Amazon, although I don't know now with all the like shipping delays and everything going on, but it's like $100 for a big panel. So it's all fake. Don't tell folks.
I love it. But it's great. It looks luscious behind you.
Yeah, we are pumped to have you. So thank you for taking time out of your very busy week, I'm sure. I wanted to give folks on the call a chance to hear a little bit more of who you are. What are you working on? And if you could maybe share a little bit of how has life looked differently now that COVID has hit, right? So how does your world totally shifted, whether maybe it hasn't, maybe it has. So give us a little peek inside that of who's Alexis, what do you do in the world, and how have things shifted because of COVID?
Sure. So I am currently the director for global engagement at the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And our whole mission with this organization is to build one global entrepreneurship ecosystem. So thinking about how do we connect the dreamers, the makers, the doers, also the policymakers, the entrepreneurs, the investors, everyone around the world, how do we connect them all together so we can better support entrepreneurs everywhere? And not just in the big cities, but also looking at underserved areas and second-tier cities and kind of everywhere in between. And connecting folks across borders. Because when you have those connections, when you focus on making sure everybody's in the know and everyone has those same ties and the same social networks, you can do a lot more good together. So that's a lot of what we're focused on collectively as an organization. And for me, my role is to figure out how can I scout the folks that we haven't engaged with yet, who are people that aren't a part of the network, who could really learn from other ecosystems who've built, robust communities and have helped really support entrepreneurs. How can we get them clued in and connected? And so a lot of the work, Spud, that you're doing around the payment protection program in the United States and figuring out how do we support small businesses and entrepreneurs and freelancers here, we're also at Gen looking at, how do we do this at the international scale too? We just released kind of a policy report on what governments are doing around the world with building new innovative, emergency support funds for entrepreneurs. And so we're trying to gather all that information together to figure out how we can help everybody out. But that's my work at Gen. I am the former CEO of 3-Day Startup, where I helped make entrepreneurship accessible with a team around the world. And we really focused on doing interventions in communities that really wanted to build that connectivity around their entrepreneurs and those support networks, and focused a lot on youth as well. So thinking about, we're all, even before COVID and the pandemic, we were all kind of trying to navigate the unknown and the uncertainty of just a rapidly changing world. And so what 3-Day Startup was doing was really trying to give youth the skills around adaptability, the entrepreneurial mindset, and determination just to move into that uncertainty a little bit easier. That's a little bit about me.
So uncertainty and the unknown has just been a part of your job description for quite a while.
It has, yes, which is why it's been wonderful working with the Sullivan Foundation, because that's a lot of what you've built with your team there too, particularly for social entrepreneurs. So it's been fabulous working with you. I think we first connected in 2015. But yeah, a lot of the work that we do, I've got to see that too for entrepreneurs and ecosystems around the world as well. Because that's most important, I think, in anything, is just knowing how do you adapt to changing circumstances, because that happens all the time in businesses, with or without a pandemic, and that happens through recessions that we go to, that happens just in normal day-to-day life for your career. And so the more you can lean into that and recognize that's life and figure out how you grow from there, yeah, is what I've loved working on, and love figuring out how to help people do that.
Yeah, I think you and I have one of my favorite connection stories, which is totally irrelevant to how do you navigate the unknown. But I don't know if you remember, but I think we met in the bathroom at the Co-Space.
Yes, yeah. On the
So,
way from the cave, right? There was a cave room.
yes. So for those who don't know, I run a social enterprise called the Co-Space. It's a 20-person home for young change makers, and our shower looks like a cave in our guest room. And so Alexis was staying, and I think I awkwardly cornered you in this weird corner, and we connected for like 40 minutes talking in this bathroom about, yeah, all kinds of cool change making stuff. And here we are now on Instagram Live chatting away.
Many years later. To
Yeah.
make it a little less weird though, one of the reasons why we stopped there is because what I thought you did that was so cool is you had all these pictures of, I can even see it clear as day now, kind of in my memory, all these pictures of people who had stayed at the Co-Space, and you'd put up Polaroid pictures on like kind of a string, and you had them clipped on, and that way you were kind of walking me through the story of people who had stayed there before. It's kind of like a live guest book in a way of, hey, this is what this person did. So we were talking about that. It was really cool.
Totally. Anyway, yeah, totally side tangents. People really want to know more about how Alexis and I met. There you go. All the important details today. So, but I am curious with you, because you talked about how, at least with your work now, but I think also with your work prior, you deal with a very wide range of constituents. So yes, you're supporting entrepreneurs, but you're dealing with policymakers, and you're dealing with the folks that the entrepreneurs are serving, and communities all across the place. So I'm curious now, given everything going on with COVID, how are you prioritizing who you reach out to? Because I'm sure you have this massive network out there, and everybody has different needs because of how COVID is impacting them. So how are you guys and you personally prioritizing, who do I reach out to? How do I reach out to? How do I know what type of support they need? I mean, what's that process been like for you?
Totally. That's a great question with a very semi-complicated answer. There's just a lot depending on who you're reaching out to, but from one of the things that's great working at Gen and working in any company is that you're one of many people, so you have a team. So everyone at Gen has a particular focus. There's somebody focused on policymakers, there's someone focused on entrepreneurs, someone else focused on entrepreneurship support organizations, and depending on what programs we're trying to connect folks to or what certain initiatives are per quarter, those individuals under each category will kind of change. So during this time though, I think a lot of what we're doing is trying to be helpful and supportive. So I'm trying to figure out how to break it down, because there are so many different folks, but there's different folks at Gen who are focused on specific categories. And there's also other people who are focused on the US versus international too. So there's kind of different verticals to look at. And depending on the day, it kind of changes on how you figure that out. For me, what I've been focusing on in my role, it's a lot of engaging folks who don't know about Gen or have been loosely connected, and how can we help make sure that they're a part of the ecosystem, receiving all the great information that we're seeing at kind of the 30,000 foot view. And so right now I'm just finding folks who I have worked with in the past, or who, when I research into a particular ecosystem, I know, oh, this is somebody who should know about some of these new policies that governments are making for COVID, or this is someone who should know about some of these other initiatives that are going on. So I think from a tactical point, maybe one of the biggest things to do is think about what's your next step, what's the smallest thing you can do, next to help engage your network. And so I'll usually write that down in the morning of like, who could really use the most help today, or who should I be reaching out to? So it's kind of vague, but it really depends on, specifically who you're engaging and what to do from there. Do you have a
Okay.
maybe more
I know
specific
you said,
question where I help?
yeah, no, I love, you sent me a photo a couple of days ago about inside your house. You have like this sticky note wall of all of your like tasks, both personally. I don't know if it also trickles into your work as well, but I feel like you have been very tactical about figuring out what next steps need to take place. As you're thinking about those tactical steps, have you seen any interesting stories or collaborations where you've got the entrepreneurship crowd who are probably far more used to pivoting and having to adapt and things, and then you've got the policy side, which does not move as quickly, and now suddenly you referenced in the U.S. we have the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. I'm calling this my PPP pimple because
I know,
it's
I
been
heard
so
about that
stressful.
when you were this morning you were
So
talking about it. Yeah.
yes, it has not been an easy process, right? Because it's like suddenly the government is having to move so quick. And so have you seen interesting stories or partnerships where you've got, entrepreneurs that you work with that move really quick and are used to change, and then policy groups or communities that maybe resist that a little bit, and how they're actually finding a meaningful path forward with all of this?
I don't have one particular story to share right now, but what I have been seeing is this huge undercurrent of entrepreneurs and leaders around the United States in particular, because I'm connected with a lot of people in Austin right now, and then some folks nationally who they're recognizing some of the cracks in the system and figuring out how do we support underneath that. There's a group in Austin that's a small business corps that's trying to start up right now that's focused on, there's so many people who need help navigating the payment protection program, and there's not enough support, and people are very confused. So they're trying to think about how do we provide volunteers to help aid those businesses, make sure they're aware of it, but then also help figure out a way to help them navigate the system. They're still trying to figure it out, but I think it's amazing that people are standing up and saying, okay, the systems right now, there's just too much happening. They can't keep up with all the calls. So what can citizens stand up and do and make a difference? I've also been seeing other people, Victor Wang, who used to be the VP of Entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation, he started a movement called The Right to Start. The idea that anyone, anywhere should be able to start a company, new initiative, new project in your community. And I know, Spud, that's something you believe in, given your work at State College and also just throughout the American South as well. And so what he's doing is he's built a petition to help encourage even more funds and more support for small businesses. So it's a grassroots effort around the nation that he's been leading virtually, of course. But he's trying to get more people to understand what is the government doing in response to small business and entrepreneurship, and how can we have a voice in that? So what I've seen a lot is just people building more awareness and more coalition building, of getting groups of people together to say, hey, we're standing together and advocating for this specific change because the government isn't making this happen. So I'm seeing that, of people addressing gaps in a system and saying, this is our proposition of how to fix it. I'm also seeing people in response to the government standing up and saying, hey, we need more volunteers, we need more support, just like what's happening with the healthcare system too. People saying, okay, I'm just gonna, be here in my room and I'm gonna start making masks and send it to people who need it. And that's been incredible to watch, and something that I've seen a lot in the US, because I'm in the US, but also that I've seen internationally as well. And I think that's huge. I think we need, as devastating as this time is, there's also a lot of hope and positivity around it as well. And I think it's just both. And you have to hold both in your head too. And so that's what I've thought about with a lot of these things, is you got to recognize what's happened and also move forward at the same time. And it's difficult, but that's also what you have to do when you adapt.
Yeah. If you're just joining us now, we've got Alexis with us from Global Entrepreneurship Network. You just talked about coalition building. And prior to this call, I just pulled up your website because I always love checking out people's personal websites. And you probably have more big group photos of like you with a fellowship in Egypt and a fellowship in North Carolina, and like you've got these amazing photos on your website of you with coalitions. And so I'm wondering if you could just share like what's been an example in your past of like a coalition that was built really well. Is there one group
Mm.
or one organization that you felt like really did it well that we might be able to learn something from that process? Because so many people are rapidly trying to build coalitions, and for many of us, they have no experience. You know, this is the first time they're jumping in and suddenly organizing a group to make masks or to, you know, rally folks to buy gift cards for local restaurants, right? Like people are just trying to jump in and build coalitions as quickly as they can. So do you have
Mhm.
any favorite stories or groups that you've worked with over the past that you think have done it well, and what was it about them that did it well?
Yeah, for sure. Because I'm in Austin and I'm with the Global Shapers Hub through the World Economic Forum here, the story I'll talk about is the coalition that we built to help monitor affordable housing in Austin. And so one of the things that we noticed is that there was a lot of progress being made by the city around affordable housing, but we knew that more could be done because there's a lot of displacement happening in the east side of our community. And we thought, man, there's such a disparity between the amount of people who live in East Austin and also how much income restrictions and limitations are being set for people who actually need affordable housing to be able to live there. So there was a disconnect on the amount of people who had the need and the amount of supply available. And so we thought, we wonder what it's like at the city of Austin and how that monitoring program is going. And what we found is that for to not get too much into it, but the program, there wasn't enough support. There weren't enough volunteers. There weren't enough people going out and really analyzing the situation. So to build a coalition of people, the first thing we did was we understood the problem. We understood that there is a gap between the amount of housing available for people who needed it and that no one was watching how much renters were setting the monthly rent at. No one was watching that difference, and that's really important to make sure that people who need housing can get it at a rate that's affordable for them. And so we understood the problem first. Second, we found a group of experts in the community who were, folks in real estate who had worked at the city and who also had a great background in affordable housing and building it. So we built kind of our group of experts to say, hey, this is what we found. Is this true? Or is it not true? What other, context can you provide with us? Once we found that, we understood, okay, we actually should build a group called the Austin Community Data Coalition and create a community of people at the local level who could really be the check and balance for the city, because the city only has so many resources to really address that problem that we had identified. And really as a community say, hey, this is so important to us that we and all these organizations, we have about 30 to 40 organizations that have come and become a part of the coalition, want to be able to analyze what's happening with affordable housing, where are the gaps, and how can we help to make sure that the intent of policies passed by the city are in line with, why the policy was created and are actually happening. And so that's what I would say for anything that anyone is building too. I think especially during times of crisis, you have to think fast and slow. You have to think of what are the problems that are happening and how can I move quickly on them, but also pause for a second and think, is this really the problem? Who do I need to fact check this with? And how can I move forward, not just by myself, but with people to move faster? And so that's what I've been trying to remind myself of when I think, oh, I have this idea for something, like I really want to push forward on it. Like I start writing it down, I put my post-its up, I go crazy and, brainstorming. But before I act, I take a second to pause and reach out to friends who are more knowledgeable on the subject than I am, and see what perspective they have. And most of the time they'll say, actually, I've seen this organization doing something great. You could just become a volunteer with them. Or they've said, actually, we don't, see any of that happening. So why don't we work together? Just kind of like what you did with the payment protection program. You reached out to 10 different friends and people are like, we have no idea what's going on with the CARES Act. Help us fund. You're like, cool, I'm going to make a video. And you've been
And
so
I
far.
also have no clue, and I'm figuring that out as I go.
But That's great. I feel like that's
But
such
that's
a
how it is.
representation of coalition building is you noticed a problem, you reached out to people to say, hey, is this a problem for you? And then you've been kind of documenting what's been happening along the way. And I think that's going to lead to really thoughtful leadership and really thoughtful solution building too. So everybody's getting accurate information. That was long-winded, but
Yeah.
I
No,
think what you're doing is great. So that's a good example
I
too.
was fanning myself, and I realized that some of our viewers may not know this. If you're part of the Sullivan family, when you're really feeling someone, you just kind of wave yourself, oh, that feels hot. So I was waving myself during that. Because I was talking with a friend last week, and someone had posed the question to him, is this the right time to start a nonprofit, right? Because there's so much need, and the government's jumping in. And so their question was, is this the right time to start a nonprofit? And his response was, this is not the right time to start a nonprofit, but it's the right time to understand your problem better than anyone.
Yes.
And
yes.
right, we talk, and I don't know if you taught me this phrase or someone else, but this idea of apprentice with the problem, right? So as social entrepreneurs, like the number one thing you can do is just get in up close and personal with the problem, right? And
Totally. Yep.
If you're not touching it, right, every day, then it's really difficult to design a solution for something that you don't fully understand. So it seems like right now, and to your point, part of coalition building is apprentice with the problem, go understand it better than anyone, and then have the courage to reach out to people and see how you can connect dots around it.
Absolutely. Well, and it's the whole idea that the Presencing Institute in theory you was taught that I'm sure you're intimately familiar with around eco over ego. Is instead of trying to start a nonprofit or an organization or something that you can put your name to, like really being up close and personal with the community, being very ecosystem versus ego, focused, and think about what can I just do right now that's going to make an impact and that's going to help people. And then later, when you want to make it sustainable and create that, sustained help and support over time, that's when you can start thinking about what structure will that look like. But yeah, so important, especially now.
Totally, right? And oh, you froze on me.
Oh, sorry. Am I back?
You're good now. You're back.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
Yeah, you're back. You're good. Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like that buzzword ecosystem, right, is probably something that in you and I's world, we bounce it around a lot, but I think people are suddenly waking up to that, of like the importance of ecosystem building. There's I was going to say there's a great book, but I actually haven't finished it. But the theory of the book is really great, called The Rainforest, right? And it's about like if you're trying to build entrepreneurial ecosystems, don't build it like a row of corn. Build it like a rainforest, right? Where like there's weird stuff, like you want to find the weird mushroom under that tree over there, because that's where the really innovative stuff happens. And so how do we in this time think about building ecosystems rather than letting our ego drive that? I deeply resonate with that.
I think, I just went to my bookshelf. Is it this one?
Yep, that's the book.
Sweet. So the person I was talking about before, Victor Huang, who just launched his new grassroots initiative called Right to Start. He wrote this book. So he used to be the VP of Entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation, and he was really supporting that whole idea of we are trying to build ecosystems because we're all in this together, and not just for people like us who are supporting change makers and entrepreneurs, but also businesses too, like your clients, your suppliers, all the different people around you who make what you're doing possible. You're all in this ecosystem together, and you all have to help support each other. Because if you don't have, the mosquitoes, the birds, all the different players, then it won't function and it won't continue to thrive. And so you got to think of all those different perspectives.
So I love that you just whipped that book out from behind the camera. That was very classic. I want to leave you with one final question here, and then I'm going to invite Arshiya to join on here. If you could leave one tool or maybe one book, right? Is there a book that you think, while people have a lot of time at home right now, they should go and download or read? Is there a tool, a book, a tip that you want to pass on to folks? Or here's the flip of that question: is there something we can do to support you? So how can we as a Sullivan Network support the efforts that are happening at the Global Entrepreneurship Network and other spaces you're attached to?
Well, I'll start with that one because I was going to reach out to you after this. But we are building something called an activity in the box for all of the hosts and network supporters in the United States and then also around the world. So if there's any really innovative experiential activities that you know of or have that you'd like to be included and get recognized for, and we operate in over, I think, 197 countries now. Please let me know. So that could be really interesting. So I'll follow up with you for sure. And I think Spencer's on this call too. So I'll follow up with him as well. But yeah, we'd love to support your work and also just kind of showcase what you've done in the rollout that we're going to do soon. And then the thing that I would leave you all with is, in terms of a tool or a book, instead of suggesting that, what I'm going to suggest is that y'all be kind to yourselves. I feel like there's so much out there about how to be productive, how to serve people, like all these different things that people can do. And I even found myself really early on being in isolation and social distancing that I was like, I got to do more. I got to do more. I got to do more. And I think it's now more important than ever to be kind to yourself and pause and make sure you're walking, you're sleeping, you're getting up, out of sitting for hours of the day. And I really believe that the more kind you are to yourself, it's going to be easier for you to be kind to everybody else and help everybody else too. So I hope that's the takeaway that the community will have outside of doing more, do a little bit more of less for a little while to make sure that you're feeling good before you get back out there.
Totally. I mean, it goes back to what you said earlier of how to balance going fast and going slow at the same time, right? So I think everybody right now is moving 100 miles an hour, and it's like, let's remind ourselves to move slow at the same time and not get worked up over that. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking time to jump on here. It's always good to see you and catch up with you. So
good to see you too. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. And I always love working with you. So thanks, SpongeBob.
Awesome. And if anybody wants to follow up with Alexis, her Instagram is pinned down there in our comment. You can also find her online, find her on social, find her wherever you are. Alexis Taylor. She's very easy to Google.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Alexis, for joining.
Thanks.
All right. That's Alexis. Alexis is great. If you're in the Texas area, once we are all back and no longer quarantined, definitely go and find Alexis. But I'm going to bring in my next friend here from Cocoon Active, who, if Alexis is thinking about big picture stuff, Arshiya is very much on the ground. Hey, there you are.
Hi, can you hear
What's
me?
up, friend?
Oh my gosh, so much. How about you?
Oh, just staying sane, hanging out in this tiny room.
Building backgrounds for Insta Live.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's a new hobby of mine, so I didn't know I was going to get into that field. So. Well, thanks for joining. I was just sharing a little bit with folks on the call, a little bit of who you are, but I'm going to let you do that because you can probably do it better than I can.
Arguably, I
would
should.
love for you to introduce who you are, what are you doing in the world in terms of the work, and how have things started to look differently for you given everything going on with COVID? So we'll start there.
Yeah, cool. Just chill, very chill questions, I see.
Right. Just layer them on top.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Arshiya Kherani, and I'm the CEO and founder of Cocoon Active. We are a brand that designs activewear focused on the needs of Muslim women. So we do athletic-focused hijabs, as well as tees and accessories. I recognize some of you guys here from the spring retreat last year that Sullivan Foundation did. So hi to all of you guys who are jumping on. The world looks very different for pretty much everyone over the past month. And as a small business, it's weird. It's taken me a little bit of time to digest kind of what this means for us on a short-term and long-term basis. Because we develop clothing, we're a small business, we're not always in production. We kind of have seasons where we're doing production and then seasons where we're doing design and sales. And so we were kind of just ramping up to go into production again, right when all of this stuff started. We had just put in a new order, and we do our production in Portugal. So that means production means like prototyping all the way through actually developing fabric, and developing the clothing and then getting them shipped here to be able to sell them to our customers. And yeah, so pretty much we had just put in an order and then everything just got completely stopped. So that's really different from just, normal. If we don't have stuff to sell, it's really hard for us as a small business to kind of know what to do. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm throughout this whole thing, I mean, everybody's getting new information every single day, but we have a really close relationship, obviously, with our suppliers and our sewers in Portugal. And we've been getting requests because we do sportswear, and so it's highly technical. And so we have been getting requests from customers to maybe pivot in a specific way. For example, there's a lot of fashion companies doing like masks and gowns and medical wear. Oop, there goes my phone. But yeah, and so we kind of have been exploring that, and it's kind of heartbreaking because I actually just had a chat with our manufacturer, last night, and they're really struggling. I mean, it's a factory of 100 people. The owner is like mid-30s. He manages 100 people, and the factory is a family-owned factory, and he was really sad because they haven't been able to make payroll like for the first time in 31 years. They don't have enough orders, orders that they had that they were already producing fabric for, but then hadn't completed their production for, have been completely canceled. So now they have like stuff that they've started without getting paid for it, and the money's already out. So even for me, like as I think about my business, it's like it was really eye-opening to just hear like a very candid account of what's going on with people who we consider to be our partners across the world, and see how this, in a 15-minute conversation, to get a whole new perspective on like how scared he is for the people that he manages, and then also like all these, like half of the people that he works with are people in his own family. It's like cousins or friends, and so how does that all, I've been thinking a lot just over a period of like a day, just like how all of this trickles through different parts of society and different levels of the supply chain, which I think as customers, we don't really think about. We think of like the people that we get the stuff from, but the people that we get the stuff from have a whole network. And I mean, I was, I think you and Alexis put it perfectly, like an entire ecosystem of people that are aggregating a bunch of resources to get you your final product. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but it's definitely top of mind for me.
I love it how you subtly frame that. I've been thinking a lot about this in the last day.
Yep.
Because so much is packed up into a 24-hour period recently.
Yeah.
So how are you balancing this idea of, right, you're maybe hearing about like the mask idea, right? Do I pivot? Is it really important for me to respond really nimbly right now and maybe create a new solution or create a new opportunity for someone, versus like staying the long path and being consistent to who you were prior to COVID and making sure that's consistent after? Like, how are you balancing all of that, given that you're in the middle of this big ecosystem and the decisions you make impact your producers and the customers and all of that?
Yeah. I'm just going to take a lot of things that you and Alexis talked about and apply them to what I'm thinking. But I think you guys have said like think fast and slow, and I'm really trying to do that. I mean, to me at the beginning, like seeing all these fashion companies going into mask production, I was just like, okay, but like, do we even need masks? Like the science is not 100% there. So should we go and be like spending money as a small business to do stuff that we don't even know if there's like scientific backing for? And also like as a company, we have spent a tremendous amount of time building out like a sustainable model for our production. And so do we want to sell things that are going to end up in a landfill in 2 months without even having scientific backing that they work? Again, in that 24-hour period, literally it's like every day there is a new version of like, wear a bandana, don't wear a bandana, like it's airborne, what's airborne, so it's this constant flow of new information. So what we've been doing is, as we get the new information, is just like iterating and seeing what's possible. So for us, again, because we are pretty reliant on one manufacturer, they have been closed like pretty much for the month. And they have been trying to figure out ways of like bring in like 20% or 30% of their workforce to like keep social distancing within the factory and then use, you know, stock materials that they have available. So we have explored some iterations. We just unfortunately like don't know if it's 100% possible. And then to your other question of like playing the long game of like staying true to who you are versus like doing a pivot. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with that a lot. I think, you know, I've taken a lot of time in the past 4 weeks to like take a bunch of like free online classes because like all these agencies and stuff that I've been following are doing like free months of like like small business support, which I think is awesome. And a lot of it has been around like messaging, like how do you message selling stuff in the time of a crisis? And I think one of the most compelling statements I've heard is like, you have no choice but to sell stuff because your business and then your, again, ecosystem of people that you support, whether it's customers and or employees, you have you're their lifeline. You have no choice but to keep selling. And so instead of feeling icky about selling, like figure out ways to like relate to your customer and how the value proposition of what you provide to your customer is the fan. I love the fan.
I'm feeling that very much.
But figure out how it's relevant to them. And so, I mean, we've definitely like, for me, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind because like, not to get so deep into it, but like if there's any customers here, we've been sold out of our like black scarves, like hijabs since Black Friday basically. And so, you know, we have customers being like, we anticipated being able to get them to them pretty quickly, you know, like by the spring. And now we have no idea when we're gonna be able to get them to them, right? Because everything's paused. So I'm trying to just think through like, you know, I still think about the mask thing every day. I'm kind of like waiting on our Portugal factories to see what they can swing with that and like also some other stuff. And then I don't know, we're just trying some new things. I mean, we're gonna do like an Instagram live like yoga session on Saturday. So if anyone wants to tune into that, like just kind of, we're just gonna try it out. We've never done anything like that. And I think for anyone else who's here, who's like, you know, who is like thinking about content from small businesses, I was thinking like I keep getting all these like ads for like free, you know, online work ads and all this stuff. So I was like, is anyone even gonna want, you know, more like online yoga? And actually like it was really cool because like some of our customers like messaged us and were like, I just started chatting with them and I was like, I asked them, I was like, is this something you'd engage in? And they were like, you know, like I'm getting a lot of ads that like all look the same. And it would be really cool to see like a Muslim woman doing yoga. Like that's something I would like much more likely like tune into as opposed to like all the ads that look the same, like, and I can't tell the difference. And I thought that was interesting because it's like also keying into like, I have my own biases of like myself as a customer, but that doesn't mean that like, I shouldn't ask the question. It was just a really good reminder to be like, before I shut down an avenue, I should like reach out to at least like 5 or 10 people engaging with the brand and be like, hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? Just like DM them. And the worst case scenario is that like it flops and like no one comes and I do a yoga session with like a cool person that I like, which is like not the worst thing, right? So I think just playing around with like new ideas, new content, and trying to listen to what support looks like for the people in your demographic is really important.
Yeah, one of the things that I've appreciated recently is how much the bar has been lowered for like what is the worst case, right? Like you see all of these like late night show hosts and their kids are bombarding them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if that's the new norm, right,
Yeah.
of like what is considered like our entertainment is like any of us can try anything at this point, and if it flops, that's just the new expectation.
It's low risk. Yeah, it's
totally.
low risk.
It's low risk,
Yeah.
and I mean, you and I, one of our good friends, Josh Nadson, was telling me last week of right, you know, like permission is granted for anybody to reach out to anyone at this point, right? Because we're all isolated, anyone will respond or be willing to at least entertain a message. And so when you have like a low bar for failure and the entire world willing to receive your communication in whatever form, like, man, that's the opportunity to do things there. So
that is so Josh. I'm not surprised.
Yes. If you want to follow Josh's, you know, talk, go check out our Sullivan website.
You truly, everyone here should follow Josh.
Everyone should follow Josh. So Josh, we're putting a ping out there for you if you're following him. So
Yeah.
I'm curious because you touched on a lot of things there, right? Your messaging, how you talk with your customers, your supply chain. What I feel like what is often getting missed in the conversation is just like, what's the thing that's keeping you up at night as a social entrepreneur in all of this, right? Because there are so many things you're balancing. Is there one thing that like you wake up in the morning and you're like, shoot, that thing's on my mind again, right? Yes, I have to juggle 10 different things right now, but there's one ball in particular that is really keeping me up. I mean, what is that for you?
Yeah, that's rough. I think two things. One thing that I wake up every single day is like think about and like don't spend enough time on for sure is there's a lot of small business resources out there right now, and I think I'm definitely not like taking advantage of everything that's there. And I think as a small business, like we don't have any employees even, and we work with like all freelancers, and we also did this like cross country move as a business across states, and so just in the past couple of months, so just trying to like that's something I wish I could spend more time on is just being like, what do I qualify for? What's the easiest way to like apply for these kinds of resources and that kind of thing. Spud has been wildly helpful just in terms of just being me and being like, hey, here's a couple of things that should be on your radar. That's been really helpful to just keep them on top of my priority list. Yeah, and I think like it's weird because I mean, there's this like phrase in like millennial entrepreneurs that's thrown around a lot, which is like imposter syndrome, which is like we're not necessarily like a positive cash flow business at all times because we're really small and like we're still very bootstrapped. We don't have any external funding, and so um, arguably we're in a really cash strapped position a lot. And so do we deserve this fund? You know what I mean? Just trying to think through like what we qualify for, and also like what feels right to take um, out of the pot. But then also, uh, yeah, that's one thing. And then the other thing is like, that's really hard for me is like, we work at the warehouse that ships out our orders, and like arguably it's not urgent, right? Like nobody needs their activewear on demand within 24 hours. And there are, I mean, like we're getting updates from our warehouse every single day. Like, here's what we're doing, like to, keep everyone safe, and, here are the precautions that we're taking. And like, we're still sending out deliveries, like, don't worry. Um, but there are delays. There are delays across all postal and courier services. People still want their stuff within 48 hours. And so just kind of like managing, like I remember like I had like a customer exchange that I put in for like a sizing thing like early last week, and like hadn't gone out even like yesterday, and like the customer is like really annoyed, and I get why this person's annoyed. It's like an exchange. They had bought it, a couple weeks ago, whatever. But it's like I had a conversation, like our customer service lines are jammed with our warehouse. Like our account managers are totally swamped. Like there are people out sick at the warehouses. There's just a lot. And again, this goes back to the ecosystem is like, for me, it's really hard to be like, I need to put pressure on you as a warehouse because like you have to ship stuff out so I don't lose customers. But also like there are constraints, and we live in a world with constraints right now. And how do we manage that expectation between customer to business owner and business owner to warehouse? Yeah, and I also think like the other thing, kind of going back to like messaging, is like, Alexis also said like make sure you're getting up and going for walks and all this stuff. And she also was like, you guys talked a lot about like engaging with like your brand and your product. And I think like ironically throughout all of that, like I did like a little story on Sukun the other day, but I was just like, the only thing that I'm actually wearing every day is like my workout wear and pajamas. Like today I'm wearing a sweater, so thank you for that opportunity. But like,
Glad to offer
I
that.
was like, oh, this still fits. It's still in my drawer. Cool. But and it's like arguably like people do need, maybe they do want their sportswear like more than they did even on a regular basis because they're not commuting and like they need to get away from their kids for 20 minutes a day or like whatever it is, right? So again, just going back to all that balance, but yeah, long-winded answer, but top two things are like funding and money, and then also like managing different parts of the ecosystem.
Yeah, especially when you're in a business where cash flow gets really strapped, right? Like
Yeah.
the urgency of that, yeah, falls on your shoulders
Yeah.
very, very quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, as that urgency has been kind of condensing down on you, have there been relationships that have been easier to manage or got more difficult to manage, right? Like I've noticed in my own work is like some of my teams are now all of a sudden way more supportive, right? They're checking in, how are you doing? Like, how are you doing? Right? There's like a level of empathy that has just
Yeah.
hit out of the roof. And then there are other relationships, whether they're clients or whatever it might be, or suppliers, where things feel really tense, right? They've got
Yeah.
something going on personally that then gets translated over to our relationship, and it's like this weird domino. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, between your team, your suppliers, your customers, like which relationships are easing and which ones are getting more tense
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I think like one of my favorite people that I mean, I haven't worked with, I guess, that many people. Like my team has stayed pretty small. It's like a small team of freelancers that stayed relatively consistent over the past few years. But um, one of the people that I just love the most is, he's definitely not watching this, but his name is Tim Schutz, and he's our he's great. He's a pastor and he's also a coder, and he's done like all of our web development over the past like year and a half. And because he's a pastor, he is the most empathetic person ever, and I find myself like like unloading all of my personal and professional problems on him on like a by
Right.
monthly basis. But he's just been really, really awesome. And I think he like the reason he has been is because he's like he recognizes that there's like a lot of changes happening, and he was just like, you know, if you need to like skip, like if you want to keep working with me but like also like need like a break on an invoice for this month, or you know, that kind of thing, and just like kind of showing flexibility and goodwill on the relationship that like we've been building for 18 months. Like it showed me that like there's probably ways that I can be doing that as well. And like it was just like really nice of him to be like, hey, we can keep working together, but also if you need to like skip payment for the month, right? And just being really, really aware, because for him coding is something he really enjoys and loves and kind of does it on the side. And so just like for him to be able to like recognize that like other people, you know, are using his services, but it's not optional, it's like something that they need to keep their businesses functional. I think that I've had a couple of freelancers that have kind of like extended versions of that, which I really appreciate. And then in terms of tensions, I mean, yeah, I've talked a lot about them, but I think like on the supply chain, right? It's Philippe is our manufacturer in Portugal, and like he, you know, it's awkward in a little bit of a way, because like I check in with him every day to be like, hey, how are things going? Hopefully nobody has COVID. Are you guys open? Like, are you paying people? You know, like, can you do something for me? Well, like I know you have 100 employees and you're managing a lot, but also like, do you think you could do this for me? So it's, I think like more than ever, in order to like de-escalate that tension, you have to make that time to like ask the personal questions, which I think depending on where you're from in the world, and even like in the US, like you do or don't do, right? So I lived in New York for over a decade, and if you were talking like New York to New York, like sometimes people would get annoyed if you even asked a personal question. Like if you were like, hey, how are you? How are your kids? How's your family? People would be like, what? This is a business call. Like I have 15 minutes. Like let's get to it, you know? Versus like
Yeah.
I'm from the Midwest, and if you're talking to someone else from the Midwest, like you have to ask, like, oh, how was this? Like how is that? Like you spend 5 or 10 minutes of your 15-minute call seeing how they are as a human before you get to business, you know? And like depending on where you are, you have to be cognizant of like what that means. And I think what I've noticed is like kind of no matter who you're talking to right now, like you have to be like, how's quarantine? And like, how are you holding up? And like, how's your life different? You know, and I think it makes people feel a little bit better to just be able to tell you what their situation is. And I think like, especially with our manufacturers, like I'm glad that I was able to do that. I'm glad he gave me the bigger picture. He just didn't respond to me, and I was like getting kind of annoyed. And then as soon as he told me what was going on, I was like, I had no right to get annoyed. Like I know he manages 100 people, you know, I know what's happening in the world, but I needed to like hear it from him, you know, to like remind myself that this isn't about me, this isn't just about my brand. Like he's managing relationships with like 20 brands or 25 brands, like it's not just me, right? So yeah, those personal touches I think are increasingly important in the environment that we're in.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that shifts. A year from now,
Yeah.
will transactional relationships suddenly have more empathy and personal touch to it? So
Yeah.
I want to be mindful. We've got less than a minute here before we close things off. So I just want to say a big thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for
thank
jumping
you.
on here. Yeah, I assume folks can go follow you. Is there, if you had 10 seconds to share something that people can do to support you, what would it be?
Yeah. I know times are tough, but if you can afford to make a purchase, you can actually, anybody who's watching this, you can make a purchase for 20% off. The code is just Sullivan, SULLIVAN 20. That's one thing. Second, follow @Sukoon Active, engage with our content, DM us and tell us what you want and what you need from small businesses. That would be super helpful. If you want to create content for us, that would also be great. Yay, thanks.
Awesome. Cool. Before we get cut off, 5 seconds here to go. Thank you for joining. Thanks for everybody for following along. We'll be